All right, so we should be recording now. So just to practice my introduction, would like to welcome everyone to the STROLO University. STROLO, as you know, has been a tagline for the Cystic Fibrosis Lifestyle Foundation, which stands for Living Stronger, Longer, or STROLO. And the mission of the CF Lifestyle Foundation is to help people in the cystic fibrosis community live healthy and active lifestyles towards living stronger and longer lives. As part of that mission, we have been expanding our scope of helping people from assistance with recreational costs to also building our sense of knowledge and power and empowerment through knowledge. And as the horizon of the CF patient population has been expanding, so too are the needs of the population in now looking at longer futures, more active futures, futures with professional opportunity, futures with financial opportunity, and futures that engage our lives in a way of society that it largely hasn't in the past. So with that, we're bringing you these STROLO University classes for free for the next 8 weeks. And for today's session on professional development, I'd like to introduce Ingrid Peterson, who is a friend and colleague and mentor of mine in the past and has such an expertise in this area and will be leading this series with her team at St. Michael's College. So Ingrid, thank you very much for your help in joining us today and helping us develop these skills. And I would like to turn the class over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian. It's good to be with you. I appreciate the invitation and I'm happy to be here and be able to provide what knowledge and expertise I have in career readiness for anyone who's interested in listening. I have a passion for doing this kind of work, which might be evidenced by the fact that I've been at St. Michael's College for 25 years and wasn't really my intention to be there that long, but I love it. And when you got a good thing going, right, you stick with it. So I've just had the opportunity to learn and grow almost every single day in my job. And if you have a job like that, you stick with it. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we'll go through the workshop. And I am going to have any questions, you're more than welcome to drop them in the chat, or if you want to unmute and go ahead and ask, please feel free to do that. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
In case you weren't aware, our colors at St. Michael's are purple and gold. So, you know, of course, there's a little bit of purple going on in the background here, but not a bad color for a Tuesday afternoon, right?
Coincidentally, that's the CF color as well.
Oh, it's
Yep.
perfect.
Perfect alignment.
Great. So just to sort of introduce the idea of resumes, I don't know if most of you probably already have some sort of a resume in place, but this really is information that'll help you just update what you already have or create something from scratch. So a resume is really just a summary of your qualifications, and a history of your experiences. It's your marketing document about yourself. You know, if you think about everything that you see, commercials on TV, this is your commercial about you. So it's a chance for you to put everything down on paper or electronically, virtually, that you would want an employer to know about you. A resume is not going to probably get you a job. That's not its function. A resume is really used to get you an interview. It's that foot in the door. And then the interview was a whole other workshop that we'll get to in a week or two. But this is just really a way to get your foot in that door. It typically, depending on the kind of job you're applying for, should be 1 to 2 pages. And obviously it can't have any typos on it, especially in some jobs that will really, get your resume immediately into the no pile. So the length of the resume, as I said, depends on the industry and the type of job that you're applying for. Just as an example, if you are looking for a finance job, it doesn't matter if you've been doing finance for 1 year or 20 years, you still typically just have a 1-page resume. That's the industry standard. If you're looking to teach in some capacity, or you're looking for some human services kind of a position, resumes can go over to a 2nd page. If you want to be a college professor, you might have a 20-page resume, which actually is called a CV, a curriculum vitae. It's not even a resume. It's sort of a resume on steroids, I guess, for lack of a better way to describe it. It just has a list of everything. So just so you're aware that there are different things that are appropriate for different industries, different settings. The first information that goes on your resume, obviously, is your name, your city and state. We really don't see specific addresses on resumes anymore. And, it's 2021. And if you're putting your resume out there on any sites, it's a little creepy to have people know exactly where you live. So there's no need for a street address, really just a city and state. So an employer can identify where you're located. Obviously, a phone number. I will say as a caveat to having your phone number on your resume, make sure that you know what your voice message says if someone were to call you and leave you a voicemail. Many people don't even go into their phone and do anything with that, so it doesn't say anything. At least identify yourself, at least say your first and last name. So an employer, if they're calling you, knows they're getting the right person. So please at least do that on your voicemail. You should have an email address on your resume. It needs to be professional in nature. So just your first and last name at gmail.com is perfectly professional, but I have gotten resumes. I got a resume a couple of years ago from someone applying for a job in our office, and this person's last name was Donner, and her email address was andblitzen at whatever. Cute. It's cute. But in a career office, it's not professional. It's not appropriate. Maybe if she was applying for a job at the Christmas tree shop or something, I don't know. But it's not cute in my office. Or, I've seen Vermont yoga girl at whatever. Again, we're not doing yoga in the office between 8 and 4:30. That's not our job. So it's not appropriate. So make sure that your email address is professional. And probably not the email address that you had when you turned 12 or 13 and got your first email address. Probably not that one, but maybe. Another good thing to include is, presuming you have a LinkedIn profile, you could have that LinkedIn address on your resume to make it easy for an employer to find you. They are going to look for you online. They just are. Why not make it easy for them? And certainly you would much prefer for them to find you on LinkedIn than probably on Facebook or some other social media. So having your LinkedIn profile address on your resume is not a bad thing. The next thing on a resume most often is a branding statement. And we used to see objectives on resumes, and we really don't see those too much anymore. We're seeing branding statements, and it's not labeled that. It doesn't say your name and address or your name and city and state and all of that information, and then branding statement. It just is a statement that lives at the top of your resume. And it's something, as the bullet points on here say, reflect your attributes, uniqueness, and experience. It's your marketing statement about yourself. This branding statement is probably also what they call on LinkedIn your headline. The statement that you don't have a lot of space for on LinkedIn, but it appears right underneath your name on your LinkedIn profile. So here I created one, marketing professional with extensive community service experience, excellent organizational skills, a passion for storytelling and targeted change, seeking a position on a difference-making team. So you want to pack as much into that sentence, or you could make it 2 sentences. You want to pack as much information in there as possible. You want it to be impactful. You want to use language that the employer would be attracted to seeing on your profile. You want to use language that's related to the job that you're applying for. So there are many different ways to kind of put this together, but thinking about your skills and experience and the position you're trying to get is a great way to kind of pull this branding statement together. The next section on a resume will depend on where you are in your career. So if you're a recent high school grad or college grad, then your education section is probably going to be that first big section on your resume. If you've been working for more than 2 or 3 years, then probably your experience section will be the first section on your resume. It really depends. If you think about your education in terms of finishing college, and that's that really is the big job that you've had, right? Bigger than any other job that you've had has been your job as a college student. So that's why it would go first. But once you've gotten a job in the field that you're interested in going into, that becomes more important than your college education, and that would go first. But for purposes of starting somewhere, I'm going to start with the education section. So the first thing that's listed in that education section will be the highest degree that you have received. So if you have a master's degree, that would go first. And then your bachelor's degree, possibly your high school, but probably not at that point. If your college degree is the highest degree you've received, then that would go first. Or if it's an associate's degree that you've gotten, that would go first. Or if it's high school, then that's what would be there. So your most recent degree is listed first. Everything, for the most part, on your resume is in reverse chronological order. So the most recent experience is listed first. You can manipulate that a little bit if you need to, and we'll talk about that in the experience section. So what actually goes in here? The name of the college or university that you went to, along with the city and state. City and state is virtually always included, so I would just have that listed in there. The degree, a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science degree, if you're talking about college, and whatever you majored in or minored in if you had a minor as well, and then the month and the year of your graduation. So if you finished in May of 2021, then that's what I don't need to know that it was May 14th. I just need to know May of 2021. If you haven't graduated yet, you could put anticipated graduation, May 2022. So an employer would know that perhaps you're looking for an internship or a summer job. So it's important to have your month and year of graduation. And then other things could be included in this section, your GPA, any honors or awards that you received, if you were on the dean's list or some other academic honors, if there are honor societies that you were a part of or inducted into, as well as if you studied abroad, that would be included in the education section. Same information, the name of the university that you studied at, the city and country, and then probably the semester, so spring of 2019 or whenever it was. And then I generally encourage people to include a little bit of information about what you studied. Completed coursework in Spanish language and culture, or whatever it is. So just a little bit of information about what you studied. And that generally makes up the education section, although Again, some of this stuff could be broken up into other sections like the honors and the awards. You could have as a whole separate section on your document. And then we get to the experience section. I already mentioned it should be in reverse chronological order. It should be in a consistent format. And I'm going to show you some examples of what I mean by that. But I will also say consistency on your resume throughout the whole document is really important. So for example, if you decide you have a date next to your graduation from college, excuse me, and you decide you want to put that date in italics, then I would put all the dates on your resume in italics. If you underline a job title for a job that you held in one part of your resume, I would do it for all of the jobs on your resume. So be consistent in how you put your document together. Consistency is really important. We're going to, again, go into a little bit more detail on the bullet points versus paragraph format, and I have examples of that. It's also really important to use action verbs when you're putting your descriptions together. Your resume does not use proper English. It's not, I was responsible for managing a team of 6 people and we completed marketing projects. It would be managed a team of 6 people, completed marketing projects. So think about action verbs and all of your sentences. I put that in quotes because they're not true sentences. All of those sentences start with action verbs, words that are going to get the employer's attention. Now, when you're thinking about writing up a description for what you did in any particular job, I would think about it in 2 different ways. Number 1, I would make a list of all of the things that you did on a day-to-day basis, like every day you, I don't know, answered phones, or you did data entry, or you sorted the mail. So make a list of those day-to-day things that you did. And then I would also make a list of any responsibilities you had for special projects. So maybe, you know, you were answering the phones and sorting the mail, but you also put together an employee handbook. And you had to reach out to other companies to find out, to see if you could get some samples of other employee handbooks, etc. So make a list of whatever your responsibilities were for that special project that you worked on. And once you have your 2 lists, I would prioritize the things that you think are most important and the things that you want to most get across to employers to whom you're going to be applying. So if you're applying for a marketing position, then I would focus probably on communication, creativity, organizational skills, being a member of a team. So think about the responsibilities you had for a particular job in those terms. And then those are the bullet points or the paragraph, the descriptions that you want to include about your experience. Okay, now I want to show you a couple of examples. So this is an example of how you could put together a description of a job that you had in a bullet format. And you can see that there are obviously bullet points for each of the different responsibilities that I wanted to include in this position. That's why it's a bullet point format. This is great. I love this format because it's really neat, clean, and easy to read, but it does take up a lot of space, right? A much more space than a paragraph format would. So that's the downside of this format. It's perfectly fine to use this or to use the paragraph format, which I'll show you in a minute. Either one is fine. It's a personal preference, but just understand the pros and cons of each. Now, every single job description, for the most part, are going to have your title, the name of the organization, the city and state, a description, and a date. For the most part, that will go in most every job you have listed on your resume. There are exceptions to everything. So of course there's an exception to that. Now let's take a look at the paragraph format. So here again, we have the title, the name of the organization, the city, state. We have the date up here this time. And then the description is in a paragraph format. So it takes up less room. Again, either one is fine. It's personal preference. But this one takes up less room. It isn't quite as neat, although it is still very neat and clean, but it isn't quite as neat as the bullet point format. You'll notice, as I mentioned earlier, each of my sentences start off with action verbs on both of these descriptions: sold, composed, oversaw, helped. If you're putting your document together in Word, you know, using the synonyms is great. If you've got too many helped, then you can use the synonym finder and you'll come up with assisted or some other things. So those are a couple examples of how you can put your descriptions together. People always ask how far back you should go with these. I would say that is a combination. There are two things that you need to consider. You need to consider how relevant the job is to what you're trying to do. And if you have other more relevant positions and they're newer, then I would use those and leave off the older things. But if the position that is older is really relevant and perhaps even more relevant than some of the newer things, then you might consider leaving the older, more relevant position on your resume. You know, it's hard for me to answer that, like generally speaking. So that's about as broad as I can get with that answer. It really depends on so many other specific things. So I would find somebody whose opinion you trust and see what they think about leaving or taking off a particular position. Okay. Another section, again.
Ingrid, sorry to interrupt. Could I ask a quick question on that? Would it be appropriate to have sort of a hybrid where if there's a newer experience that's not as relevant, to just list the title and the location and the dates without as much description, but it shows that those dates you were indeed working, you weren't just sitting on the couch, but you don't use the space, you use the space on the more relevant experience.
That would be a great way to handle that. You know, I think we're going to see a lot of that with COVID and so many people who've been laid off or changed jobs or were not working for a period of time and maybe got hired back. I think we're going to see a lot of those unusual kinds of things. So that's perfectly appropriate. Everyone around COVID and their job, everyone has a story to tell. So remember, this is a marketing document. So you've got to figure out the best way to tell your story. And I can do this general resume workshop for people and give you some tips, but I can't do it and, you know, cover all of those specifics. But that would be a great way to do, you know, to use your word, to use a hybrid of making sure you have the time period covered, not a gap, but not sinking a lot of real estate on your resume into that job that's not as relevant. So that's a great point, Brian. Thank you. Another section, again, this is optional. It's not a section you have to have on your resume, but if you are in particular looking at something that requires some technical skills and you have, you know, if you are an Excel wizard and you know what a pivot table is, which PS, I don't, but I know enough that I know it's a thing. So I say it like I know what I'm talking about, but I don't. So I would be sunk if I put it on my resume if someone asked me about it. I just know it exists. So if you have those skills, you should absolutely list them on your resume, in particular if they're important to jobs that you're applying for. Generally, the skills sections that I see cover technical skills or language skills. And we were just talking about that before we got started with the workshop. In our chat, pre-workshop chatter, we were talking about language skills, and there are really 3 ways to list those on your resume. You can say that you're fluent in, you can say you have a proficiency in, or you can say you have a working knowledge of. And that's really a comfort level. That's not a test that you're going to take to determine that. That's your comfort level. So if you say that you're fluent in a particular language, you better be, because what if the person who's reading your resume is fluent in that language and they say, oh, let's just do this in Spanish. And you're like, well, I'm not that fluent. Well, fluent is fluent. So then say that you have a working knowledge of or a proficiency in. So that's all about comfort level. And then if you have a science background and you have a lot of lab skills and that's the kind of job you're applying for, then I would see that on there. Other things, sometimes I'll see someone CPR certified or Red Cross certified. So there are other skills that you could list on here that would be perfectly appropriate depending on the jobs you're applying for. Another section, again, these activities and interests can either be one section on your resume, you can combine them. They could be 2 separate sections. You could use one and not the other. That's really, again, your decision to make. Activities are extracurricular things that you do, volunteer activities or community service. They could be artistic or athletic in nature, music, leadership things that you do in your community. Those are all the activities that you might have listed. They could come from a wide range of places. And then hobbies, things you like to do for fun. I always have students say, well, I have a lot of hobbies. Could I list them all? Well, no, I wouldn't list them all, because then it looks like you just want to play, which might be true, but that's not why you're submitting your resume to someone. You're submitting your resume because you're looking for a job. So you don't want to look like you want to just have fun. So I would restrict your hobbies to 3 or 4 things that you enjoy doing. Why is that even on a resume? It's on there just really as an icebreaker. So if you're coming in for an interview or you have a virtual interview and an employer thinks, we're just gonna chat for a minute, they may say, oh, I see you like to cook. Tell me, what's your favorite? Do you have a specialty? Are you an Italian cook, or are you a French cook, or what's your specialty? And just, have a little conversation about that to kind of break the ice a little bit. So that's the only reason that's on there. Use it, don't use it, totally up to you. References. This is a completely separate document from your resume. You should not list references on your resume. And I put up a little sample document here of what it could look like. So you have references for, and then your name, and then your contact information, just like you would have at the top of your resume, just like you would have at the top of your cover letter. Again, you're thinking about personal branding and sending that same message. So all of your documents have that similar kind of look, whatever that would be. And then you list the contact information and the title or your relationship to typically 3 is enough references. Every now and then you'll get asked for more than that. But if they just say, please send me your references, then I would send them a document like this, unless they're wanting you to input it into some online form that they have. Okay.
Ingrid, I just have a micro question on this.
Yes.
On the first example you have there, and it's not necessarily topic related, but format related. In between the sections, you have that vertical bar.
Yeah.
Is there a special key? Because I use it all the time, but the only way I can insert it is to go somewhere else and copy it. Is there a keystroke for that vertical bar that you know?
Yeah, it's right on my keyboard. It's above the /. It's on my keyboard. It's above.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I never saw. Okay, thank you. I never saw it there.
Magic.
Perfect.
Ryan, I'm still solving problems for you.
Great.
You know what? I love that vertical bar. It is so, like, sometimes I'll put bullets between all of those things, but that vertical bar is just, I just think it's so clean and I just think it's really sharp. So I use it quite a bit. Okay, cover letters. So a cover letter is just your letter of introduction. Essentially, you're saying to an employer, I'm sending you my resume because. So that's all that it is. It should be tailored to the job or internship, whatever you're applying for. It should be specifically tailored to that. And I always get this look when I say that. I get this look from people like, so I have to write a new one every time. Well, yes and no. If we return to my example of I'm looking for a marketing job, generally, most marketing positions are probably going to have similar requirements, right? They're going to look for someone who's a good team player, has good communication skills, who writes well, who maybe has some social media skills, good organizational skills, etc. Maybe a project management experience. That's what they're going to be looking for. Most marketing jobs are going to have similar kinds of requirements. So no, you probably don't have to rewrite your cover letter every single time. I would suggest if you're not really sure what you want to do and you have a marketing cover letter, then I might also have, I don't know if you're also interested in human services and working for a nonprofit, I might have a cover letter that's directed toward that. And then you'll just have to adapt that marketing cover letter for different jobs, and then adapt the human services cover letter or nonprofit cover letter for different jobs, but you won't have to start from scratch. So I would have different versions of your resume, of your cover letter, depending on the kinds of things you're applying to.
Just make sure you don't leave the wrong name of the person or the business from the previous letter. I think that's an instant no also.
Yeah, that's a great instant no, for sure. Mm-hmm. It should obviously be well written. If nothing else, if nothing else, this is a writing sample. It's a pretty brief writing sample, but it's a writing sample that an employer may also ask for a writing sample, but this cover letter is a writing sample as well. Obviously, no typos. It should be in professional business format, and generally it would be one page. There are, of course, exceptions. Education, it might go over to 2 pages, possibly human services. Just depends on the job and your experience level, etc. So generally it will be 1 page in nature. I am not asking you to write a thesis statement here. This is not your senior, I'm graduating from college thesis paper that's 30 pages long. It's 1 page. It's probably anywhere from 3 to 5 paragraphs. The first paragraph is simply, I was excited to see the position that for XYZ marketer that you have open at your company. I am so happy to submit my application. So it's 2 sentences. Your first paragraph is 2 sentences. Your second paragraph, I recently graduated from, or I have experience working in whatever it is, and I am looking forward to beginning my career or continuing my career in this field. I have a number of skills that are a great match for what you're looking for. For example, I have excellent communication skills. As part of my college experience, I worked with student government and was the communications director for the entire student body. I sent out social media posts. I confirmed meetings with the president's office. I coordinated times for our presentation with the board of trustees and developed good communication skills throughout this whole process. And then you move on to the next thing. So what you want to do is figure out what the employer is looking for. So I always tell people, go through that job posting that you're applying to and take out your highlighter or underline things, circle things, whatever. Figure out 3 or 4 things that they're looking for and tell them you have it and give an example. So if they, they're looking for someone with good communication skills, then say, I have great communication skills. Here's an example, like I just did. If they're looking for someone who has knows all about pivot tables, then you say, I have great experience with pivot tables, and I did this project in such and such a class or in my internship or whatever. And then figure out another thing that they're looking for. Maybe it's being a team player. And so you say, I have great teamwork skills. Here's an example. So you figure out what the employer wants. You tell them that you have it, and then give them an example of that skill to show that it's true. So you're not just saying, I have great communication skills. You should hire me. You're giving them an example to show that it's true. Okay. So that's why a cover letter is important, because you're doing all of the work for the employer, so they don't have to figure out how you're a good match for them. You're telling them, you're doing all of that work. See, you're solving problems for them and they haven't even met you yet. That's what you want to do with your resume and cover letter, especially your cover letter. So figure out what qualifications you have for the job opening that they have, and tell them you have those skills and give them examples of it. So that is either your second paragraph or your second and third. You don't want it to be a big, huge, chunky paragraph. So if you need to break it into two, do that. Your next paragraph, after you explain your skills and experiences, I've attached a copy of my resume as evidence of my qualifications, and I look forward to hearing from you soon. So you tell them you want to hear from them. If this were a sales job, then I would say, if you have a way to do it, I would be very assertive and say, I will follow up with you next week, and then follow up with them. That's not necessary in many jobs that you'd be applying for, but if that's the nature of the job, if you're in a sales position, they're going to want you to be assertive. You should be assertive in this process and demonstrate those skills to them. But for most jobs, it's just not necessary. Just tell them you look forward to hearing from them, and then sign your letter sincerely, not love. No one loves each other. We don't know each other, just sincerely. So you sign off on your signature and you are good to go. So that's the essence, very briefly, of a resume and a cover letter. I am happy to answer any questions. I'm going to unshare my screen here. If anybody has any questions or wants clarification on anything.
Oh, no, you explained it really well.
Oh, thank you, Tiffany.
You're on mute. Right.
Thank you. Fired already.
You're being so good about having it muted.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. That really was tremendous and really helpful. I did write down a couple questions that I had. One was, when you're building your LinkedIn profile, which I know is another workshop, and listing that, I was wondering, it seems like employers often do some background digging and often look at Facebook profiles, and college students might have some party themed posts. And so what is the recommendation in terms of hiding your Facebook profile or cleaning it up, or how do you advise people who are searching for work in regard to Facebook profiles?
Anyone searching, if you have a Facebook, and I can tell you that most college students have Facebook, most college students don't use Facebook. So, it's a different generation that's using that, generally speaking. So I would absolutely clean it up, whether you're actively using it or you used it in the past. I would absolutely clean it up with things that, just wouldn't be professionally appropriate.
Right.
But I would do that for anything, you know, anywhere that an employer could find you online. You know, you really should. A couple of times a year, you should be Googling yourself and seeing what's lingering out there. And do you need to get rid of it or figure out how to get rid of it, etc. So you should, that's just a check you should do professionally a couple of times a year at the minimum. Yeah, all those red Solo cups in the picture behind you.
Unless you work for
Bottles,
Solo.
you know. Unless you work for Solo. Absolutely. Absolutely. I told you earlier, Brian, I have 2 kids and they're both in college. And I always tell my son that, you know, empty liquor bottles are not a design choice. So, you know, at least don't have them behind you or in any pictures you have floating out there.
Right. A small format question that I've wondered about in the past is when you're listing experience in bullet points versus paragraph style, periods or no periods?
I would just be consistent. I don't think it makes any difference. Most of the time I don't use them, but that's just a personal preference. I would just be consistent with it. That's something I catch on students' resumes all the time. Like none of them have periods on them except one. I'm like,
yeah,
get rid of that.
Yep.
No one
Details
else
that count.
notices, but
Yeah,
I do.
I do.
Yeah, exactly. See, we trained you well, Brian.
Exactly. And one last question I had was being now, you know, longer in the workforce than I was in the education. How would you describe a difference between a resume and a CV or curriculum vitae?
Curriculum vitae. There's a really distinct difference between the 2 documents. A CV has a lot of like published work in it and presentations and a lot of that kind of detail that generally a resume doesn't have. Could you include that as part of a resume? Yes. And the longer you get in your career, the more likely it is that you'll have that. But it also might just be that you have a longer resume rather than an actual CV. So, you know, it gets a little blurry there. And I can share with you, let me find it and I'll drop it in the chat if any of you want the link to our website that has resume samples on it and also has a CV sample and some information on doing a CV. So there, I just popped it in there to look at some of those samples and see an actual difference between the 2. You can do that.
Oh, great. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions or anything anyone else wants to chat about with regard to resumes and cover letters?
I think of one.
If you just got hired, Tiffany, you're good to go.
That's true.
One piece I was wondering about with Jennifer is, I know Jenny with her volunteering of teaching our painting classes was, Jenny, I don't know if you have any questions on this, but I know you were working on going back to getting your teaching certification to teach art as a work opportunity. So as you were talking, Ingrid, I was thinking about the difference between her volunteer roles in sort of her activities and interests section
Mhm.
versus that also as a work experience. I don't know, like where it best fits.
Yeah. And that's one of the, remember when I said it more closer to the beginning that there are ways that you can manipulate this? And that, I'm glad you asked that question, Brian, because that's a great way to sort of manipulate how you do things on your resume. So if you use the word experience as the title of that section, that it could be volunteer things, it could be jobs, it could be a variety of things. It could be class projects that you worked on. The word experience does not imply that you got paid for it. But if you call that work history or employment, it implies that you got paid for it. So you wouldn't be able to put those volunteer things in there. So Jenny could have a section of teaching experience, and that could be paid things. It could be volunteer things. And you would list them in there just like you would any job where you have your title, the name of the organization, the city, state, a description, and the dates. And just write it up. Even though it was a volunteer experience, it's an experience. So if she is thinking about going into teaching, have a teaching experience section, and then have a section of other experience where you're doing non-related jobs. And that's how you could have that teaching stuff more toward the top of your document. Again, you know, that's what you want to market. That's what you have to brag about. So you could have that section closer to the top of your document, and then the other non-related jobs down further. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, that-
Absolutely.
Good. Good. So you have a lot of flexibility in this. Again, consistency is important, but you have a lot of flexibility in how you put it together.
Awesome. Well, any other questions for Ingrid?
No, I feel like you explained it so well.
Good. I'm glad it was helpful.
Hmm. I love the slides because I'm a visual learner, so having
It is nice to see it.
yeah, to be able to see it, it's like, okay, I understand.
Great. Thank you.
Great. And maybe some questions will come up after the class. And Ingrid, do you know, will you be instructing the upcoming workshops, or will be also your teammates, or?
I think my team is doing the next couple of
Okay.
workshops. I can't remember which one. Is interviewing skills next? I can't remember.
I think so. That sounds right. Let me look. Yes, interviewing and professional dress.
Okay. My colleague, Laura Neville, is going to do that one. And then I think Tim Birmingham is doing the next two. And then you and I are going to discuss the rest.
Great.
So, yep. Next week is Laura, and she's awesome. She has, her background is in applied linguistics. I actually hired her sight unseen. She was getting her master's degree in Spain. And we did a virtual interview. And so that was 2 years ago, I guess. 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
She's so awesome. She's just, so great.
Great. Well, I look forward to meeting her and learning some new unknown stuff.
Absolutely. Good.
Great. Well, thank you again, Ingrid. You've been absolutely wonderful. I look forward to working with you on future upcoming workshops. And again, can't express our thanks deeply enough.
Absolutely. Anytime. It was great to meet everyone. I'm happy to be here today.
Wonderful. Okay.
All right.
Be well,
Take
everyone.
care.
Thanks again.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
Bye.
have a good one.